Welcome to this course on strategic management. Before I begin this course, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Marc Samuel. I'm a Lebanese Canadian and I work in consulting and in higher education. I'm a professor of management with a doctorate degree in business administration from Grenoble École de Management of France, in addition to an MBA and an engineering degree. I have 21 years of multinational corporate experience in telecommunication, digitalization, and business transformation in the private as well as the public sector. I have 7 years of higher education experience teaching in Europe and the Middle East. My research interests are in the areas of perceptual service quality, cross-cultural management, and digitalization. My current research is focusing on the dynamic and non-linear impact of socio-cultural factors on perception and behavior for strategic decision-making. I'm also researching the role of digitalization on perceptual service quality for global economic rebalancing. The structure of this course consists of 6 lessons of 45 minutes shown in 3 sessions of 15 minutes each. Each lesson is followed by a Q&A session. Each session of Q&A would constitute 15 minutes over a 45-minute sequence. This course is accompanied by text and audio and video material and the course guide in the study pack. By successfully completing this course, you would learn how to develop, implement, and evaluate strategies. In this course, you will learn to clearly discuss strategic matters with your business environment, identify key attributes of optimal strategies for an organization in a specific market or industry, ramp up your competencies on different tools and models used in strategy, formulation, implementation, and evaluation. Now, the course objectives are focused on stimulating strategic thinking and acting. Basically, strategy models do not give answers. They should invite you to think, then to ask the right questions. Second objective would be to highlight strategic options for gaining competitive advantage. Also, to clarify the integration between strategy formulation and implementation, as well as promoting and practicing pragmatic research in strategic management. Students who complete this course will master the understanding and familiarity with basic theories and concepts in strategic management. Think and write critically with the opportunity to apply theories and techniques learned onto current economic issues and problems. Now, the methodology used for this course focuses on employing fact-driven cases from the business world and sharing them in class to be able to bridge the gap between theory and pragmatic applications, thereby equipping the students and participants with more practical and relevant instruments in tackling and rectifying pressing issues in the workplace. By doing so, I support my pragmatic approaches from my own experience with best practices from the public and private sectors. Students who complete this lesson will learn about the system theory, the environment and customer value, prominent notions on strategy and strategic dynamics, strategic drift and market challenges, how organizations manage strategically in a changing environment, the competitive advantage concept, overview on vision, mission, and strategic formulation, defining financial and non-financial performance, performance measurement, and strategic evaluation. Lesson 1. Introducing the strategy concept. Lesson 1, Session 1. We start with the organization and the environment. And I would like to start with some sayings by prominent people in that respect. Beginning with Samuel Rejewski, who was a chess player and who basically talked about positioning when it comes to strategy, saying, "I am essentially a positional player. Although I can conduct an assault with precision and vigor, when the opportunity arises, my style is neither over-aggressive nor too passive. My strength consists of a fighting spirit, a great desire to win, and a stubborn defense whenever in trouble. I rarely become discouraged in an inferior situation, and I fear no one. Whereas Winston Churchill talks about learning, exactly saying the following: personally, I'm always ready to learn, although I do not always like being taught. Now, to go to Warren Buffett, who mentions things that are important if in the industry. When an industry with a reputation for difficult economics meets a manager with a reputation for excellence, it is usually the industry that keeps its reputation intact. Let's start with the first point, and that is system theory. Basically, before explaining the difference between open and closed systems, I would like to mention the idea of organizational profitability and how we reach that point. So every organization would like to be profitable, and to do so, they have to respond to customer needs and trends. So what they do is basically grab or pull the ideas from the market, understand the customer needs, evaluate their production efficiency, tools, techniques in terms of distinctive capabilities, resources, and then bring about a developed product that responds to those customer needs in order to create value, and that would lead to profitability. But if we have a closed system that does not interact with its environment, then all that would not lead to the intended objectives. Basically, they would still provide products, but without listening to their clients. Whereas open systems are those systems that listen to their clients closely in order to bring about the best products that respond to their needs. So basically, the system in general is a set of interconnected and interdependent parts assembled in a way to generate a unified entity. Talking about open system uses this interconnectivity to translate what we say about in terms of functional requirement specification into system requirement specification, joining forces internally to respond to the external needs of the clients in order to produce those products. How business often understand customer value. So basically, customer value could be understood as an economic worth, or could be built into a product, as we just mentioned in our example, or service in the form of attributes and features. Value could be the price that they are willing to pay, or the cost of the attributes and features built into the product, or the net difference between what a customer pays for a product and the benefits received. Let's talk about some strategic notions that are considered traditional. So starting with strategy formulation, strategy implementation, Ansoff and Porter. So we know when we talk about strategy formulation, we always mention things like PESTEL, SWOT analysis. So basically we need to go and do a context analysis, analyze the environment. To prepare ourselves for implementing that strategy, we need to understand all those forces and as well understand our capabilities in terms of response to those forces. So basically we're talking about strength, internal strengths versus opportunities and threats that might hinder our achievements of the intended objectives. For implementing strategies, it is important to understand the tools that have been provided to us traditionally by researchers and authors like Ansoff and Porter. So we will get to Ansoff and Porter later, but for now let's talk more generally about the notions. So strategy could be thought of as a posturing thing, like positioning, as we mentioned before, or a rational plan for a big organization, a well-established organization. Strategy could also be based on a structure, conduct, performance, meaning that the environment determines that strategy and the strategy determines performance. Or it could be looked at as strategy, structure, performance, meaning the deployment of resources into appropriate organizational structure or restructuring to determine performance. Or it could be purely looked at from a resource perspective. So the resource attributes in terms of skills, uniqueness of resources, competencies, flexibilities, rarity, the value of the resources would enable certain strategic behavior which improves performance. Now, in our time, prominent definitions of strategy focus more on the creation of unique and valuable position involving a different set of activities, and we will talk about that. Strategy is also a firm's theory about how to compete successfully. But when we say theory, it means we cannot depend on theories to achieve our objective. Therefore, we need something of a practical nature to implement that strategy. In the science of formulating, implementing, and evaluating cross-functional decisions that enable an organization to achieve its objective, we need to develop visions and mission statements. We need to formulate and implement and evaluate a strategic plan based on the vision and mission statements. We need to make cross-functional decisions in order to achieve our objectives. Now, when we take strategic decisions, as I just mentioned, that strategic decision is basically stemming from the vision of the company that is interacting with the internal environment and the external environment. So basically the vision comes usually from the founding members who have their own culture, but in the same time those members are part of an environment that is affecting them so that they create this vision, and that vision becomes the vision of their organization. That vision is in close association with their resources, capabilities, competencies, and that would also affect their structure and the trends, consumer competitors that are in their environment. Once we have a vision, we create mission, and then we take a strategic decision that would lead us to a certain position in the market. Now, what is important about the market? We need to understand that the market is part of an environment, what we call a dynamic and complex environment. It's fastly changing, rapidly behaving, and not static in its nature, meaning that we always need to adapt to that changing environment. If you see the straight line, that represents the environmental change, a linear upward change, and if you see the scale-like representation, that represents the incremental change of an organization trying to adapt to that dynamic and complex environment, and basically trying to adapt to the changes in that environment. So why do we have this shape? That's because every time we need to understand what is happening in the environment, we need to prepare ourselves with our capabilities, take the time to launch a plan, and then evaluate that plan once that plan is implemented. All that takes time. That's why you see those axes, time versus change. So basically, when we reach the point where we evaluate, the environment, and listen to this, does not wait for us. The environment keeps changing. So once we evaluate, it's not the end of the road. We need to continue, and every time we do that, the environment is changing as well. The important thing about this is not to have our change represented as a straight line, as much so as to be able to catch up with the environment environmental changes. And I'm not talking about the market changes, because the market is within this, not only the business environment, but also the social environment. So basically what we need to do, or our target or our objective, is to minimize the strategic drift between us and the environment. And the strategic drift is that gap between the change that we do to our organization with respect to the dynamic change happening in the environment. Now, what are our maneuvering capabilities during different challenges in strategy? Let's take, for example, the strategic challenges in general. We cannot have a lot of maneuvering space in that term, and that could be represented based on different research up to 20% maneuvering capabilities. So once we set a plan, basically because we are living in a changing environment, we need to adapt to it, and there's not so much maneuverability in that respect. When it comes to profitability challenges, we have more maneuverability, and that could lead us all the way up to around 60%. When it comes to liquidity and financing, also that goes all the way down to 23%, all the way down to bankruptcy. So just to give you an idea about what maneuverability capabilities we have during strategic planning and implementation. All right. So let's go back to ANSOF. ANSOF talks about a simple matrix between product and the market. So basically, it's a 2x2 matrix that mentions the product versus the market, whether that product is exists or present versus an existing market, or versus a new market, or whether that product is new versus an existing market or a new market. So if we have a present product in a present market, we call that market penetration. And you could see or hear or hear about that term a lot in balanced scorecards or dashboard that are usually presented to shareholders, such as market penetration rate, for example. If we have a present product in a new market, we call that a new market development, because basically we are using our own product to create a new market segment for it. Now, if we have a new product in the present market, we call that product development. Usually we also call it a new product development, because we are in our market, we are well established, we only need to produce a new product. As we mentioned before, if we are an open system would listen to its client. Basically, since we are in our present market, we know our clients, and this is how we produce a new product to satisfy their need, respond to necessary trends, demands, to create value. Now, if we have a new product in a new market, we call that diversification. We're going to go in depth through diversification in later sessions. Another model that talks about the market versus product, or let's say our market share versus the market speed or market growth, is the BCG model that was designed in 1970 but still applicable nowadays. So basically, what is the ideal situation here? It's what we call a star. A star is when the market is growing and we have a market share in it. So our market share in that growing market is high. That's a star. Now, when the market starts lumping down, the market starts declining while still having market share in it, that could be transformed into what we call a cash cow, okay, for us. So basically, we are producing units that generate cash in excess to what the business or the market needs to be sustained. Now, what could then shift towards is the dog, and the dog is when the market share is low, becomes low, in a low market growth. So basically, we go from high market share in a low market growth to a low market share in a low market growth, where we have units with low market share in a slowly growing market, obviously. The most problematic situation in that respect is when we produce a product that do not equip us with market share, and in the same time that market is not growing or is really hindered by certain restraining factors. This is why you see the question mark. So having said that, let's move on to discuss standardization a bit. Advantages of early standardization. Basically, we need to set the pace and force competitors to comply with certain standards in order to compete in the right way. Now, if we set them early, there are also embedded risks, and one of the risks is taking irrevocable commitment in standard that might not succeed in the future. So, if we want to address the trade-off, we should think about our innovation to try and fit the benefit of early vis-a-vis late standardization. So what I would like to say here is that standard is important for an industry because an industry would not function without a standard. What is most important is how much commitment do I give to that standardization at the early stage or later stages. And that's a question of trade-off and strategic decisions to be taken. And this is just an example about standards. Like an industry without a standard, you will see that there will be problems of fitting, of norms, of compliance, and so on. Whereas with an industry with a standard, you'll feel that there's something on track, you have everything set to move forward, etc. Now, what could be strategic problems that we will face during planning and implementation? So basically, if we plan strategies, those strategies are not considered successful until we implement them. And not every strategy will succeed. Some of the strategies will fail because they might not serve a genuinely strategic interest. They do not have sufficient management support. They are developed without input and participation from management. They take over territory of others. They're not related to those currently controlling the business. They advocate poor and unconvincing actions. Drivers of new business environment. There exist three main drivers to the new business environment, whereas thinking about strategic planning is important in that respect. We need to understand what is happening in terms of driving forces versus restraining forces. Basically, what drives nowadays the environment is the information technology, data, the digital age. Technology and innovation in terms of innovating new products based on not only on creativity but also on the digital resources that we have. And last but not least, globalization, as we see the world as one global market and operations. End of lesson 1, session 1.